this whole idea that you don't need procurement. I think it's a real possibility that we need to contend with, that in 5-10 years time, procurement is a computer.
The pilot flies the plane between 3 to 7% of the flight time. The rest is done on autopilot. But it's those 3 to 7% that determine the most critical outcome of the safety of the flight. We step in with our subject matter expertise in 7% of the time when we need to help enterprise to make decisions that will elevate it to the next level.
Everybody, welcome back to Proc-N-Roll. Today is an exciting day where we have the three musketeers together again. We have Natasha, one of our favorite people in the world, Zach, on the other side of the world. You know, we're bringing our minds together today to get super practical and figure out what's happening as phase 2 in stakeholder management. We got into some really cool conversations last week, but we want to dig a little bit deeper. But before we dive into that, guys, I want to know what's top of mind for you. We've been interjecting this here and there, and my mind is being blown in 100 different directions over this last week. From my perspective, I woke up to news that the Supreme Court is basically putting a kibosh on Trump's tariff stuff. I haven't digested it enough to talk about it in much detail other than to suggest that the chaos of putting tariffs in place is going to transition to the chaos of what's next. So wild there, but big on my mind is this new Clawdbot or whatever it's called today, and the implications to procurement, business in general. I don't know if you guys are already seeing this in your world. Like what's happening? Is this top of mind for you, Zach? I know you're Mr. AI. Is this top of mind for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, in the AI world, Clawdbot is really making waves, right? And now I think the founder has moved across to OpenAI, so you can tell that some of the bigger companies want to make moves in this space. And yeah, like an agent that lives on your computer can access all your files, all your documents, can execute software on software for you, and that can just operate like independently, like without you having to prompt it every time. Like it just goes and does stuff and brings that back. And it's sci-fi levels of like change that we're potentially facing and dealing with. And the AI space is just moving so fast, which is super exciting because I do think we're about to hit a massive productivity boom across the world and literally every domain. But at the same time, there's a lot of dislocation and, what's the word? A lot of stuff that's just going to get in the way, right? So, yeah. Well, have you installed it, Conrad? I think you've said you told me I
have two guys on my team that, 10 days ago or so, maybe 2 weeks ago, they installed like early on before people kind of knew what was happening. They were doing backflips, so excited. And then when they started to see the agent kind of moving in places that made them very uncomfortable. It was like, shut it down, like panic and concern and shut the whole thing down. They've kind of reapproached the trying of it and the playing of it in safer ways. We haven't done a big proliferation because I've asked the team to figure out, what are the guardrails to make sure that we're safe. But the implications of what I'm seeing are insane. There's things that we do in our business in Graphite today that are incredibly complicated for like a human brain to kind of wrap their head around. The configuration, the scope, the workflow, the triggers. Like just think about the entire configuration of something you might do from a customer. This bot can basically just hold it in memory, and you can do things. I mean, it learned the whole thing like in less than 10 seconds. It learned the whole thing, and then we could it's pretty cool what's possible here. I think we're just scratching the surface. Natasha, I don't know if any of your clients have been bringing this up and talking about it. Is this part of any conversations you're having yet? At the client level.
Not yet. Not at least not in details, because the level of maturity and sophistication in any of our clients is very low. So they're willing to explore. But I'm having these conversations with many CPOs who are trying to understand and is prediction that orchestration is dead. Is it real or not? Right? Like, we didn't even bury Coupa yet. Orchestration was already dead. So how did that happen so quickly? I would say the pace of change is intimidating and overwhelming. So I think that, and Conrad, just like you, I woke up to exactly the same news. And what was going through my head, like, instantly is that schizophrenia continues, because this push me, pull me, it's just like procurement yo-yo. So on one hand, you need to renegotiate all existing contracts, that were impacted, not all existing, but the contracts that were impacted by the change of tariffs. But at the same time, the reality is that it's not all the tariffs got rolled back. It's only the tariffs that were, the decision on the tariffs that were made as an emergency act. Everything else stays in place. So that creates a lot of, it takes away transparency, because your contracts are operating on different level of tariffs. And while it will provide immediate cost relief on some impacted categories, and it will potentially expand the supplier base and reopen some global options, at the same time, you live in uncertainty that it can roll back. It will take away potential opportunity with nearshore providers, and some of the providers already may have selected. So I think that procurement and legal really need to come close together and reestablish different contractual parameters, like ceiling and floor, that manage this risk generated by tariffs. So just so many changes. I think it's just like procurement professionals really have to have steady heads, and like during this period of time, because you can easily be thrown off your game if you react onto every change that comes out every day.
Yeah. There's no doubt about that. And what I would say is, with this ruling from the Supreme Court, it's as you said, just going to create a tremendous amount of uncertainty about what may be done, what may not be done. What the administration will pivot to try and sort of bolster up what they want to do in different ways. Like, there's just as we talked about, uncertainty this year, you can count on it. It's going to happen. I want to jump to the kind of the episode content we wanted to talk about, but I just want to your question about what's going on with orchestration, the thoughts I've been having, things I haven't tested, are that it would not be difficult to take one of these agents and train it in your entire tech stack, your policy, your process, your everything, such that you could go, your basic business stakeholder could come into Slack and say, hey, Natasha, or whatever. Let's just say that your procurement bot is called Tasha, and Tasha sits on Slack as a channel. And then all of a sudden, Zach wants to buy something, just says, hey, Tasha, I need to bring this marketing agency in. They're going to be working with us for 3 or 4 months. And Tasha basically inspects all of that information and goes, oh, well, we're gonna need to launch an RFP, and we need actually procurement to lead this RFP because of the expected dollar amount that you're talking about. It will interact with you. It will ask you questions there, and then it can actually kick off that stuff. Would you like me to email Zach, and have him get started on the RFP? Or even just, sometimes we're seeing it go do what it wants to do, like before even getting your permission, frankly. So the idea that it really will be, my belief is that every person in the organization will have something like a CPO or center of excellence level knowledge of procurement sitting right next to them, even though they're in marketing or finance or engineering or anything else, and they just go ba-da-da-da-da, and all of a sudden this process starts going, instead of interacting with sort of a TurboTax level flow that goes through things. Zach, I don't know if you're kind of starting to get those thoughts, but I just think it's going to be very disruptive. The underlying applications, I don't think go away. I think they change the policies, the processes and such, but I do think the expectation across the enterprise, once the enterprise figures out how to deal with all the risk and problems here, because I think that's probably what's going to slow down all the enterprises from really leaning in here. It's going to take 6 or 12 months for people to go, here's a safe way to actually do this. Because you'll be tempted to give it access to your Google, like, hey, here's all my Google stuff. But remember, Google has your passwords and things like that. So accidentally, it would be very easy to give this agent access to your bank data, your phone and 2FA, and like a whole bunch of stuff could accidentally happen. So I know that sort of sounds like fear and, bluster, but it's real. And so figuring out how to control the agent, how to put boundaries around the agent, I think is really what all the enterprises need to figure out next so that they can use this cool technology.
But Conrad, help me to understand one thing. If I'm in engineering and there is a bot called Tasha, which I don't understand, sorry, not the bot, the agent, and it says that based on your needs, your procurement will need to issue an RFP. So from that perspective, you don't need procurement because that agent is working on your RFP already. And it's already scanning the database for the agencies or suppliers that would be the best suited to provide you options, right?
Yeah, I don't know where you draw the lines between the Tasha agent and the sourcing agent that Tasha interacts with and how it flows. Zach, you've been playing with this more than I have, and we could easily talk about this for an hour. I think we need to schedule an episode in the very near future to kind of dive into this and kind of give people more of an understanding. I don't know how long, Zach, until you're ready to do a show and tell. My guess is the Zach R&D labs are spinning like crazy right now.
So I think the most exciting thing for me is when you said Natasha is actually my honest belief, right? This whole idea that you don't need procurement, right? I think it's a real possibility that we need to contend with. Okay, that in 5-10 years time, procurement is a computer. Let me be more specific so that's not scaremongering. Procurement operations is a computer, right? And we can scale procurement across the entire business with very little effort because the stakeholder in engineering would want to procure this thing, and then the agent would walk them through it end to end. And maybe, out of 100 events, we get one sourcing manager who's occasionally checking in and just making sure that the events are running correctly, et cetera, right? So the scale and the productivity gains are going to be enormous. You're not going to need as many people, I think, supporting, et cetera. So what's really exciting now, and I think what a lot of companies are clocking in on, is how you actually get the agent to run the end-to-end process. So rather than look at specific use cases in that process, how do you run the whole sourcing exercise from that initial prompt that you send to Tasha, and then Tasha executes that in compliance with your policies and, generates the RFX, generates sourcing strategy, confirms the requirements. This is all, in my view, completely possible and, like 100% it's happening. So
I've been a skeptic, Zach. Like this idea of my agent negotiating with your agent, I've been like, yeah, okay, maybe, but I don't know that I'll see that. And believe, like I'm looking into that reality now, and with a lot of belief that we're on the verge of that level of automation. It's going to be really cool, and it's going to look totally. Companies out there that are doing AI negotiation and AI sourcing, and like this is a completely different generation of automation and AI than I think what anyone's been really building. So very interesting. Listen, stay tuned. We're going to come back to this. Natasha, I know you got a million questions. I do too. Zach's going to most likely here be the expert. Maybe we'll bring in a couple of my folks and others to kind of shed some light on this. This leads very nicely into our bonus episode here about stakeholder management. Last week, we talked about it in some length. And I felt like still we were just scratching the surface. We could do 6 episodes on stakeholder management, but what I want to do here is a rapid fire question answer discussion kind of session. We have 7 or 8 questions I'd love to get through. Some of these will touch a little bit on the stuff that we talked to last week, but I want to just dive into these questions. I think they're really good and they'll uncover the round out the conversation that we had last week. So brace yourself, put on your seatbelt, let's go. So savings versus speed. Should we stop the process if a stakeholder is demanding or indicating that they're going to make an award. So we're working with a stakeholder now. I know this feels like sourcing, but it comes back to stakeholder management. So we now have a stakeholder that says, hey, a little bit like we said last week, we got this. Don't worry about it. We made this decision. Do we go ahead and let them, like, the decision is made and we just kind of become a doormat in the process? Or do we stop the process and start driving change with that stakeholder, kind of to the purpose of the policy or whatnot, right? This is a really kind of tricky nuance. We'll go around the horn here. Natasha, do you stop the process or do you say yes?
Depends on the impact to enterprise. If I just want to exercise my procurement power to say stop, then I will not. And if I see that it will have detrimental impact on the enterprise and broader goal, I'll stop.
Zach.
Yeah, I think presuming I have the mandate, I agree with Natasha, right? Like, it really depends on the impact. I think procurement should step in more and be more vocal about, things that affect the overall enterprise. I mean, that's ultimately how you build the credibility, right? With the wider C-level and senior groups, etc. I think it's by voicing those kinds of concerns, ensuring that you are showing up for the enterprise. You're not just there to run an operation or a process, but you're there to actually add real strategic value.
Conrad, see that it brings us to how we started the conversation with what is the power of procurement. Like, if procurement is no longer needed to run an RFP, then what do you need procurement for? And I think that's exactly how the role of procurement is changing. We are no longer gatekeepers of the policy, gatekeepers of the access to suppliers, gatekeepers on use this template, don't use this template, right? Like, that is no longer our role. Our role is, as conductors, see the entire orchestra and we see the entire ecosystem of how enterprise operates, the different stakeholders, different suppliers, plants, manufacturing, retail, whatever that is, and how to suggest to the enterprise to operate it in a mindful manner that will make you the winner in your industry. And procurement, like, CPOs had never had that loud of a voice. And I think that it actually developing technologies that allowing CPOs to say that I know the impact, how it will trickle down across the entire organizations. Like, today, CPOs with these tariff rules are in excellent position to take initiative, come to the CIO, CFO, CEO and say, let me tell you how this new ruling of Supreme Court will impact the organization, and what if it reverses back? Because now Trump administration knows that they only need to use the right laws to push through the tariffs, because the main reason the Supreme Court ruled it out because they used the reference to the wrong law.
Yeah. So what summary? Go ahead, Zach.
I guess, Tasha, what unlocks that? Is it just the enterprise mindset that enables an individual, the CPO, to step out of that functional box, or that process box? Like, how do people actually mentally make the leap to procurement is now, because I love what you said. I completely agree with what you said, that, we're not gatekeepers anymore. Procurement is no longer the gatekeeper. So how does people, sort of step into that more strategic, more influential position? Well, when, they're really too familiar with the processes and stuff like that.
It's such a subtle thing. And I think it pervades across all of our lives. Like, you can look at one thing that you do, and if you're doing it for ego versus doing it for good, like, look across your whole life. Like, the exact same action is good versus bad based on your motivation and your ego. And I think what we're saying here is, you may need to pull the plug on a decision the stakeholder wants to make because it doesn't align with enterprise priority of goodness, right? Like, the stakeholder's really making a bad decision for the enterprise, and we need to step in. But if we're caught in this gumption trap of, bureaucratic ego, like, this is bad news, right? Like, and I think the individual needs to be able to recognize those signs, have enough EQ to say, like, my ego is getting caught up in this. And remember, we're talking about today building stakeholder management, building relationships, building that trust. This is not like an absolute. I think like you're going to have to manage through these. You want to have that relationship, but you don't want to be a doormat. Okay, next question. Seat at the table. Do we earn it, or is it a mandate from the leadership team and we have it? And how can we scale our business and our organization and what we're trying to do without a policy with teeth or without a seat at the table? So Zach, we'll start with you this time.
No, definitely earn it in my view. So you need to have a reason to be at the table. You need to be delivering enough value such that your peers at that table recognize the value that you're bringing and your domain expertise, etc. Look, how do you earn it? I guess, as we know, it depends on the industry. Some industries like are really well suited to having chief procurement officer. Other industries, take financial services where I work, the title of chief procurement officer isn't as common, right? So, and that's just by virtue of what's being bought, directs and how core it is to the business. That said, I think even if you were in an industry where buying and procurement isn't really the main, driver of value, I think this is where the conversation is even more relevant for you, because we are saying that now there is an opportunity to evolve procurement so that you can get closer to these other business domains that you're serving currently and start to really understand, how to make them more commercial, how to operate them better, how to join them up with other operations in the business. This is where orchestration came from, is procurement is being constantly asked to join the dots, like go join the dots, but do it at that more strategic level, right? And start to build that space and for yourself through stakeholder management to actually make a real impact and a real difference.
All right, Natasha, over to you. Do we earn it? Is it our job to earn it, or is it leadership's job to mandate and empower us to have a seat at the table?
No, earn 100%. And nothing is granted in life. And I think that when I started my career in procurement 27 years ago, we were operating by demand. You have to use procurement. Well, that's the reason I've been fighting against people not wanting to work with us and hating us. It's like, no, like if we have something to bring to the table, bring it. I continue to be a very strong believer that procurement professionals have to be very strong subject matter experts.
Yep, 100%. Imagine you show up in an organization, the former CPO had a seat at the table, you show up and you don't continue to earn it, right? You start being, having a lack of good leadership, good communication. Like you may even still warm the chair, but very quickly you'll start losing influence and, eventually they'll probably stop inviting you to the meetings. Okay, next one up. Natasha, this is coming to you. It's in the guise of Maverick spend. And this relates to stakeholders because they have shadow procurement out there. They're doing what they want to do. Is a zero tolerance policy around Maverick spend even possible or desirable? Does trying to push 100% compliance of, spend management or Maverick spend, does that start killing innovation for the business? Like how should we think about how deep we're trying to put our arms into the spend that's taking place with our stakeholders?
Even if you would ask me this question 2 months ago, I would say that it's very hard to fight shadow procurement organizations. And just if we strive to eliminate 100% of Maverick spend, we'll probably generate more enemies than friends. And I would say now in the current environment where everything is very closely connected, addressing shadow procurement organizations is the best time possible. Is just the best time ever because you can stitch everything together through automation without creating friction between the organizations. It almost like the need for shadow procurement organization disappears if path to the results becoming so quick.
Yeah. Zach, what do you think when you start seeing, like, what's the strategy for managing the spend with the stakeholders as it relates to sort of building that relationship with them and enabling the business?
Yeah, I think look, the biggest spends are usually like capital type, big investments, big strategic relationships that are going to do something, quite core to that stakeholders area, business area, etc. So I think the relationship you need so that you're brought in when those conversations start to happen, those really big things, right? But you should still try and just have compliant processes run across the rest of the spend. So the tail spend, basically, in any particular category. And I think this is where, as we were talking about earlier, and we can have more conversations about this later, AI is going to play a massive role, right? Because it allows you to just, spread your reach and just do more, basically, right? So you can cover more of the spend, you can monitor more of the spend. So have those monitoring in place, have the compliance in place, adhere to policy, use it. I think it's quite good. Procurement, has teeth sometimes, so use that, but equally don't neglect the bigger, more strategic things, and which require a more human, touch, like we've been discussing.
I think about back in the 90s with procurement cards, right? Remember how anxious people were? Was like, hey, if we give them a procurement card and tell them they can go buy what they want, like, is that going to be okay? Like, it's become such a huge amount of, it's not AI, but this huge automation in terms of enabling the business to go do what's needed, has these thresholds and everything else. I mean, it's not like that's ever going to go away. It's just, those were implemented with policies and guardrails and structure so that it kind of helped them avoid doing something dumb, buying software that had a license that wasn't properly reviewed by legal or whatever else. But sorry, Natasha, I interrupted you. What was on your mind there?
No. I wanted to ask for your perspective as you are implementing graphite solution for various customers. What do you see that many organizations continue to operate with multiple procurement functions? Not procurement organizations, but procurement functions. Like multiple organizations conduct procurement functions, or you see that it's becoming more centralized. And does the systematic approach help with that?
Yeah, it's funny, and you guys both probably see this as well. There's as many flavors of procurement organizations built out in these enterprises as there are ice creams in the world, right? You come in and I'm constantly surprised, like, wow, like I wouldn't have imagined procurement reporting to legal or, like what's happening here, right? Just even at a high level. But yeah, the next question I was going to ask actually gets really into this. So let's just roll and kind of carry that question, and I'll make a comment, Natasha. But how about shadow sourcing? So you go into an organization, you have your procurement team, you start looking around in your listening tour, and then all of a sudden, hey, there's somebody over there in engineering that looks an awful lot like a purchasing person. Like they're really deeply involved in the supplier management process and the RFPs and everything else that's going on. Do we care about that? I think this is coming back to this theme that we're touching on here, that it's okay. Like if we have this enterprise mindset, these different structures and functions of procurement and how things roll. What exactly is Maverick spend, Natasha? Is Maverick spend that is implemented in a way that we don't want it, or is it just spend that's implemented outside of our control and we don't like it being outside of our control or our manage, right? Like maybe we would make the same darn decision if it was in our control, but again, it's an ego thing. Like you were supposed to do that with me and my team. How come you're not doing that? So where do you draw the line and say it's Maverick versus what the business needs, and we just don't understand what their needs? So I personally believe we need to lower the bar on the cost and effort and administration for the business to get and do what they need to do, in a proper business, legal, low risk sort of way. And we need to be able to do that, better, faster, cheaper for everybody.
I think you just answer your own question, that you cannot look at Maverick spend on its own. You have to look at it in connection with risk and in connection with speed to market. Because if engineering is doing something on their own, and that there's an engineer who looks and walks in and sounds like procurement professional, but he's not engaging procurement in making purchases. If that purchase is within compliance established by procurement, by legal, by the company, established and adopted by the company, if it's not risky, if it doesn't put the enterprise in any incremental additional risk, and if it helps them to get to product or services faster, and if it elevates enterprise, go for it. I think the role of procurement remains to be establish the right legal and commercial boundaries and the stakeholders can bounce within them, go for it. And if they can't, then reach out to procurement. It almost like make people like give them freedom to do their own business within the parameters you established. And when they realize they cannot fit in parameters, they reach out to procurement.
So we talked a little bit.
That would be nearby.
In our prediction episode, I think we scratched a little bit on kind of the size of procurement organizations and everything else. I think, Zach, it touches on this idea. You go into an organization, they have what looks like sourcing sitting in the business. For sure, probably you're going to find cases of what is supplier management sitting in the business, because that's a collaborative effort anyway. Good thing, bad thing, anything to add to what Natasha's spelled out there? I think that was awesome, Natasha.
Yeah, no, I agree with Tasha. I'm of the opinion that I always have been, that procurement is really a skill set and a capability. And it's never made fully sense to me that, that all that should be centralized with a certain group somewhere in the business, because everyone can apply commercial expertise to any project that they're doing. And people do to various degrees across whichever business unit they're sat in. So if you come across someone who's doing that really, really well, they're your champion, right? You make that relationship. I'm going to let you crack on, mate. But by the way, just make sure you're complying with the policy and you report a couple, just get them up to speed on like what the minimum kind of guardrails are for delivering the enterprise service, but let them crack on. And then if you see someone who isn't so good, you teach them and you train them and you provide them with the tools. You say, if you're on an RFP, you always need to ask these questions. Like because otherwise you might be wasting your time if you ask these questions later and we can't bring the supplier on board. Like, just educate them, but otherwise give them the space and the freedom to act. Only intervene if you actually see Maverick spend and that is just bad spending, right? Like no checks, no balances, no competitive buying for large amounts of money, that kind of thing, where you see actually the enterprise is actually wasting a lot of value there. I think in those cases you can definitely intervene more with the stick approach, but otherwise, I think use the carrot.
Yeah, and risk as well, like Natasha.
Yeah, in the age of when you're going to have agents operating next to people, every enterprise will have to pay attention to how they're changing their processes, because the flow of information will no longer be the same. Like so some previous connections will be circumvented or just eliminated altogether. And I think this is another great opportunity for procurement to shine, because as intimidating and challenging and fast these times are for procurement, because something is coming up every day, it's an amazing opportunity to actually drive guidance that we're simplifying the process, we're simplifying the systems, we're taking this out, and the flow from purchase to pay remains very compliant and low risk. So I think it's perfect. The timing is perfect, and the fact that the enterprises will have to start paying attention to the process, right?
Just to add more color to your point, Natasha, right? And in the latest agentic research around how you build agents, it's been observed, there's multiple ways you can do it, but it's been observed that agents work especially well if you just focus them on a certain outcome rather than give them a detailed process to follow, right? So they could take many paths within guardrails to get to the objective, but that really changes how procurement process is managed, exactly like you're saying, because, it's no longer so many gates. There are many different ways to get to the right answer, as long as the agent's able to figure it out. And to be honest with you, that is actually how procurement works today. We document all these processes. So many organizations I go into have hundreds of pages of process documentation and guidance. And now my most common complaint is there's too much guidance, right? It's too much documentation. And I always look at it, I say, okay, yeah, you've documented everything. And I guarantee you nobody knows these word for word across 120 pages. So really what you do as a human actor agent in procurement is you are flexing a little bit. You're using judgment, you're using reasoning, you're using all this stuff to route things and get things past the line. And so agents for AI got to work the same way, right? So it's nice to have a really clear process. Reality is procurement's more messy. And the good news is agents can handle messy process.
All right, guys, next question here, KPIs. So, Natasha, I'm going to come back to you and start with you again on this one. So should procurement be measured on the stakeholders' goals, right? We've talked about enabling business success, enterprise focus. So are we looking at their goals, or are there our traditional goal of savings? Like, what do our KPIs look like now as we sort of mature and get focused more on the stakeholder?
Former, 100%. Enterprise goals, stakeholder goals. I think procurement should walk away from its own goals. And frankly, procurement goals should derive from enterprise goals.
What kind of goals do those look like, Zach? Because I saw you nodding, I think we're all in alignment on this one, right? Focus on the enterprise, focus on the enabling the business success. But that gets a little tricky, right? I think it's easy for us to say, yeah, that's the answer. But what are examples of the kind of goals that you see organizations when they're doing this well?
Yeah, I think it's less about examples for me, Conrad, more about the frameworks, right? So, and a really great one that most people are familiar with is OKRs, Objectives, Key Results, which is, it was minted in the tech world, right? But now it has usage across everywhere, especially because everything is so techified now. So OKRs are about how you connect your business strategy objectives and cascade those down to procurement CPO level targets and directors all the way down. And everything's linked and everything's helping drive goals and sub goals. And I think that's a really great framework. And I am seeing a lot of interest in this from a lot of procurement organizations.
Maybe to add to that, let's say if organization is communicating the goal that increase revenue by this percentage, increase operating profit by this percentage. In the past, procurement instant reaction is like, okay, well, to improve your operating margin, we're going to take 50 million out of the system. So we're going to negotiate. We're going to RFP the hell out of everything, right? But I think today procurement professionals have opportunities to think is that, okay, well, if we need to increase operating margin, how can we help companies to take the cost out of the structure of the company without touching people? Like, how do we focus on simplifying processes? How do we work with, distribution centers and thinking, can we relocate? Can we establish different relationships with 3PLs? Can we work with engineering and think about, are there any portions that we can do near shore versus where we are? Like, look in and how, let's say, we have multiple technology systems that used to do small pieces of kind of part of the supporting and enabling a part of the process. Can we eliminate any of this? Can we stitch it differently? So I think the great opportunity for procurement professionals to look at the enterprise and see, do I understand how my company operates, and do I understand what are the sources of revenue? How do we make money, and where do we lose money? Where are the duplications and redundancies in our operation that we procurement professionals can see with our trained eye and provide company suggestion how to turn it into profit?
Yeah, it's really good. I'm seeing this through line. I'm really interested in your perspectives as well. In a few minutes we're gonna get to wrap up. I have 2 or 3 more questions, but there's a lot of commonality in these questions and these answers. Let's talk about the experts, right? We're now working with engineers. We're working with technical experts in HR, marketing, whatever. They have decisions they want to make. Maybe they have a vendor deal, a contract that really is a bad deal. Where do we draw the line between being an expert and being like a helper, right? Because now it's easy for these organizations. We're going to go in and say, hey, this is a bad deal. And they're like, oh, you just don't understand. Like the engineering here, the chemicals, the whatever, like this is the right thing, but you can see it from this different perspective. How do we deal with that level of expertise or deep knowledge into the function or the business as we're working in this space with stakeholders? Zach, why don't you take a run at this one?
There is no line for me, Conrad. I think, you want to be the best ever procurement professional. You better be the best ever expert in that subject. All right. But you apply it with a certain lens. So your lens isn't necessarily the specific product innovation or whatever. Your lens is like, how are you going to structure it so that you really creating sustainable commercial value over time? And you're more managing the external relationships and kind of the business's interactions with the broader outside world. Like that's your lens. That's where you're playing. But you need to be an expert in materials, specifications, all those things. Now you need to know 100%, But I would say, if you want to be great, you got to be 90% plus, right? Like, you got to be able to have those conversations.
Yep. Makes sense. Natasha, same perspective, or do you see it from a different side?
Do you guys remember one of our guests, Ted Palmiller, how he started his career in supply chain, and then he went to tech, and then he went to procurement? Like, he was not subject matter expert in marketing, or he probably did not know like supply chain, not supply chain, corporate professional services or real estate and facilities as deep as he knew supply chain and tech. But over the years, kind of like he learned how to navigate space in general. But I think having subject matter expertise is a prerequisite for stakeholders to pay attention to what you're saying. You really need to know either very deep one area, or you have to, like, the more senior you go, the more you are forgiven if you don't have deep subject matter expertise, because you have a team of smart, experienced people who can provide that. I'm looking at it again as a changing role of procurement. The pilot flies the plane between 3 to 7% of the flight time. The rest is done on autopilot. But it's those 3 to 7% that determine the most critical outcome of the safety of the flight. And I think that with procurement professionals need to start embracing this philosophy that we're not responsible for flying this plane for 100%. We have agents, we have processes, we have policies, we have guardrails that actually allow an enterprise to run through the everyday activities in a compliant and efficient manner 93% of the time. And we step in with our subject matter expertise in 7% of the time when we need to help enterprise to make decisions that will elevate it to the next level.
Yeah, well said. So much of this, like, this is almost like shadow sourcing, Maverick spend, seat at the table. Like these themes, they all come together here. I've got a couple more I want to jump into here before we give it a wrap. So whether it's shadow sourcing, you may be like, okay, well, they do or don't have a shadow sourcing team. I want my person to sit with the organization. So you co-locate, maybe, I don't even know what co-locate means in today's world of virtual, right? Maybe it's just attending Zoom calls that maybe otherwise, but co-locating with the business, your person now starts getting closer and closer to the business. I remember in my early days at Intel, there was actually a strategy not to have procurement people sit in a function or in the business for too long, because it gets too cozy, right? They start like shifting their mindset from procurement, like, I don't know, the procurement mindset completely to the business mindset. You kind of need to figure out how to do both. How, Natasha, how do you think about this? How have you done it? And what advice do you have for leaders out there that are trying to figure out, is sitting with the, like, physically or virtually sitting with the business a good idea or a bad idea?
It's a good idea in a measured way, because I did have one situation when we hired an excellent marketing professional. She came from the agency. She was co-locating with the marketing organization. It allowed us to build very, very close connection to marketing. But then we realized that she's actually negotiating against ourselves on behalf of the agencies, because she just knew it so well that she's like, no, that's not how it's supposed to be. So he kind of like had to bring her back to procurement and infuse in her a little bit more of, okay, you're not responsible for the P&L of the agency. You're responsible for the P&L of the enterprise. So I would say that dotted line reporting to the stakeholders helps a lot in building these mutual goals and mutual responsibilities and mutual and interest in mutual outcomes. So maybe direct line to procurement, dotted line to the stakeholders, spend as much time with them. I believe that when everything's said and done in 5 years, the people who will still be running procurement will be those who have deep subject matter expertise, broad thinking, and ability to make decisions, tough decisions, challenge status quo and kind of like operate in a challenging environment bravely.
Yeah, and I would add maybe number 4 to that was build, maintain, and sustain relationships of trust and, positive collaboration. Not always being a doormat for sure, but being able to push and influence and drive. Like the relationship side of this is really important. Okay, I want to jump.
I was going with that, but I missed the words. Thank you for finding my words.
Hey, no problem. One of these days I'll start speaking Russian and, hey. Okay, so last question before we call it a wrap here. And in the wrap, I'd love everyone to just kind of go, okay, based on this conversation, what are your insights, like top level advice coming down around the stakeholders? Before we get to that, I want to dive in here and say, okay, last week, Natasha, you showed us a stakeholder map again. We've looked at it before. Very cool, a way to measure the relationships across. What happens when you have that stakeholder that's just in the red? Like it doesn't seem like you're making progress. They're either constantly in the red or they feel like they're too far out of bounds. Is this a divorce time? Like, do you just put them in the red and leave them alone? Like, how do we deal with stakeholders that are there? Like, they're just out of reach almost because of the nature of the relationship and or how they're acting. Zach, I want to start with you so we can wrap up with Natasha, the author of that amazing map. What do we do with the red stakeholders?
I'm not a former CPO, so you guys probably have better experiences and answers than I do. But for me, I would fall back to governance, right? So if it's really red and there's no saving the relationship, then I'll fall back on enterprise governance structures to get the mandate that I need, that I'm entitled to, right? So if it's red and I'm not entitled to actually do anything, then there's nothing I can do, right? Yeah, I would fall back to that basically. Make sure bring others into that conversation, so it's not just me and that stakeholder.
Natasha, I've heard you actually share this example of, hey, this is like $25 million of spend. You can appreciate it's my responsibility. So I know you have some really interesting insights on how to do this. Any additional thoughts? How do you deal with that stakeholder in the red?
Well, you try everything you can. Take for lunch, take for dinner, go for a run together, find common subjects, find common interest, try to understand where they're coming from. But at some point you may give up. Like at some point you may decide that, you know what? There's so much work to do. I'm spending so much time on it. There is absolutely no ROI. Some instances you escalate, but this is where I finally found at least one moment where I disagree with Zach today, is that I wouldn't rely much on governance. I wouldn't rely much on escalation because that rarely brings any positive results. And if anything, even if it brings immediate results, you win the battle, you may potentially lose the war. So at some point, we just need to step out. I had an instance when one of my direct reports could not establish strong partnership with his immediate stakeholder. And they traveled together. They went for beer. They went for a pickleball. They did everything they could. And then they realized that they are such different people with such different system of values and mentality. There's absolutely under no circumstances they will have a productive relationship. So, okay, well, we just do what we must. And we know that these relationships will continue to be in the red until players change.
Yeah, bottom line, I think we're not in a situation where we can sort of divorce the person, throw them out, fire them. They're generally not going to report to us. And yet we still need to work with them, right? So I would say, and I think you touched on it, Natasha, the amount of energy that we invest in different parts of the organization and with different people can be different, right? Where we have stakeholders that are really lined up and working hard with us, we naturally will invest a little bit more. And in those stakeholders that are being super resistant, I think the building of the relationship and working together is going to look different as well. Unless there's we keep coming back to the enterprise, right? What's the enterprise goal? What does the enterprise really need? I think you're both probably right in terms of, do you escalate or do you not? If somebody's driving the whole company off a cliff, something needs to happen here, right? So that's probably almost never going to happen. So I think most of the time, I think I side with Natasha. Like, be careful where you light a match, because you're gonna get burned as well, probably, as this thing starts to flame. All right. Really great. I love this lightning round. I don't know that we'll do the lightning round very often, but I love moving quickly through these items. There was clearly a through line here. Zach, what was your perspective of the through line? What are your walkaways with today that give practical insights to how to think about stakeholder management here?
Yeah, I think I'll put it into context, right, of all the change in tech and with AI and everything that's coming. This is the best opportunity ever for procurement, right? But you need to change your mindset. You need to have the enterprise mindset now more than ever. It's not about gates, as we talked about. It's not about process anymore. It's about outcomes. It's about influence, relationships, enterprise thinking. That's the headline for me. Like, there's so many little things that we covered along that, but that's really what my takeaway is the nature of procurement is evolving, and you should evolve with it.
Love it. Love it. Natasha, what's on your mind as we wrap up today?
Massive changes can be intimidating. Lean in. Ask for support. Rely on everyone in your network who can help you to get to the next level. But don't get overly intimidated and held back. This is a great time to be in procurement. We just need to be brave and broaden our perspectives and horizons.
Yep, I love it. I'm gonna double score on something Zach said about outcomes, and I'm gonna add to that, not ego. So outcomes, not ego, folks. Focus on what we're trying to accomplish. Set your ego aside. It's going to cause you to do some things that are probably relatively uncomfortable, especially if you get into some tricky relationships. But this isn't about you. This is about the enterprise. This is about enterprise success. And yep, the world is changing, folks. I think we just, in the last month, somehow turbo kicked in on AI and agents, and everything's going to look different. So brace yourself. As we've said before, get learning. Don't sit on the sidelines. Don't be afraid. Get your hands dirty and figure out what's going on. We'll figure out as soon as Zach's ready how to do a show and tell. Until then, don't forget to like, comment, share, and do everything you can to lift the practical implementation of procurement across your enterprise and your peers. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care. We'll see you all soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.